Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Two Trees Podcast. I'm John Dillon, and I'm here with Nick Church.
Hey, guys.
Jacob Kessling.
What's up, guys?
Martin Listener.
Hey, all.
And Lane is back from Alaska, but he's just chilling out with us today. It's good to have you back. Thank you for saving the world and returning safely.
Gosh. Him being back is the
home.
most important thing that's happened today.
I feel like we
household,
should like play some patriotic song about being a soldier, a great American. So I didn't want to sing it, but he would really appreciate that.
I was waiting for you to burst out into song there.
American soldier. It's terrible. They play that stuff at basic.
Can we
restart?
restart?
Can we not
That's
play
ridiculous.
this at all?
Do they really? No, this is happening. This is live. Well, guys, we have had a pretty busy day. Today has been just filled with stuff. It's a Sunday, and Jacob, you have cooked the fatted calf.
I did some brisket, and you know what? I recently found out that that's like cow neck. You know, I didn't know that for the longest time, but it's actually delicious if you cook it low and slow.
Low and slow.
So it was good. It was Zoe's graduation party, so you never know who's going to show up. The weather turned out great, but it was a good day.
I got here for the party, and the brisket bowl was completely empty.
Yes,
I was welcomed. I felt like this was just a
we
banner
had the gift of
saying,
hospitality.
So
we
glad
made sure
you're
there
here.
was just enough until John shows up.
I
So
appreciated
we
that.
Put it all away.
I got here, and the first person I meet is Nick, and he's like, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. Like,
Food's gone.
First thing I did is I ran out of friend. The next thing I find out, food's gone.
It's because I ate all your food.
Oh, man, it was bad. But that's okay. It was a really great party. I think everybody had a good time. We're all proud of you, Zoe, for graduating and stuff. But mostly we're glad Lane is home.
Yes.
He gave me $10 to say this. No, we've been sitting around talking really since we started the podcast, just about what the unseen world around us looks like. Why does Satan act the way he acts? Why does the spiritual warfare around us seem sometimes counterintuitive? It's almost confusing. How does a being like Satan look at God and think, I could take him? Like, what's going on in his head there?
We always just think he's proud, arrogant, you know, whatever the case is. I mean, he's just full of himself. But I mean, I still don't know how you could ever think I could take him. He knows he's got it. He knows he's got to lose. I'm assuming that he's in this point in time, he knows that he's lost, and he's just trying to create as much damage as he can before it's over with. Because that promise of the crushing of the head is going to happen. But in the meantime, while he still has time to play, he's going to try to take us all out.
I think there's a deeper strategy than that, though. I think that's definitely a part of it, that he's trying to just cause chaos and whatnot. But I think he's also just trying to change the rules. If you can change the rules, you change the outcome. And so if you look at some of the stuff we're going to get into, we have the righteousness of God, not just because God is right, but because he created creation. So he created the rules of engagement. And Satan is kind of, I think, in my mind, saying, if I can change the rules of engagement, then I can control certain stuff. And so I think that's potentially what he's vying for when he's doing some of these things. But ultimately, we know that it's going to fall short of everything. But that's kind of my thought.
I think you get kind of a glimpse of that, don't you? When Jesus crosses the Sea of Galilee, and there's that man who's demon-possessed in the graveyard, and the demons run down, and they're like, what are you doing over here, and why are you here early?
Right.
It's almost like they're like, no, it's not time yet. We still have lots of time left. Get out of here. This is our space.
You wonder what kind of meeting happened where they had this discussion about timing and how they've kind of concluded that. We don't notice that too. I mean, we see the language of this communication, but never considered really. What do you mean it's not time yet? What conversation was had prior to this? Was there a demonic meeting in the unseen?
An email went out.
Yeah. Here's the time frame.
But you're kind of insinuating that the evil realm knows the timeline.
So that's the question. Really, is has there been rules put out in the heavenly realm that we're not necessarily privy of, but we're watching the perhaps the echoes of that happening as things lay out, which leads to lots of questions that we have, which I know we'll get into today. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the discussion we'd love to have is these kinds of things.
Yeah, and this isn't a ramble, but it is a ramble. There's not really an outline today. There's just kind of a general idea, and so we're just kind of talking about this because when you go back and you look at Satan's plan, it seems to be laid out, excuse me, in the I wills of Satan. He wants to be above the other angels. He wants to place his throne higher than them. He wants to be like the Most High. And then when we find him in the gospel accounts, he offers Jesus, hey, I'll give you the nations of the world. You bow down and worship me. It seems that his strategy isn't just brute force against God. It's very tricky. He is more cunning than any beast of the field. What are you wearing?
Sunglasses.
It's the lighting. It's
I feel like I'm playing poker. He's got these crazy sunglasses on.
But see, John, I tried to articulate this thought several episodes ago, a year ago now, when we were doing the I wills of Satan, because there's two ways that you can defeat your enemy. One is you can be stronger than them, or you can overpower them. Or two is you can change the field that you're playing on. And that's what I'm talking about before. There's no way that Satan can overpower God. But if he can bring God down to his level, then he can win. There's a lot of fun memes about that when you argue with somebody. If they can bring you into their playing field, then they can overtake you. We've talked about that a lot with the territorial spirits and stuff like that. But this is almost a higher step of that territorial spirit idea that we're talking about.
Yeah, we're looking at really the roots of territorial spirits
The
here.
territory is creation.
And when
Everywhere.
you look at the fall of Satan, which I think happens in the Garden of Eden, I think Satan tempts the priests of the Garden of Eden, and he corrupts the temple. That's an act of war against God. Satan is given a job. He's supposed to be a creature of righteousness and holiness, and he betrays that trust. The next thing you know, Adam and Eve are full on defining good and evil for themselves, and this desire that God had for mankind and him to live in harmony with each other, to dwell with mankind, is broken because of our actions and because of the actions of the satanic strategy here. And so really, if you frame this in the lens of a temple, that this rebellion begins in a temple, that's what the Garden of Eden is. It's a place where God is dwelling with mankind. It's a place where heaven and earth overlap. That the corruption of the temple seems to be something that is presented time and time and time again throughout the rest of the Bible. Why is it that these beings want their own temples? Why is it that in every corner of the earth, religions are springing up, worshiping, I think, the demonic hosts, the fallen watchers.
Right.
And all of a sudden, what they seem to want is an imitation of what God has already done. They're not creating something brand new. They're ripping off the original, and they're going with the sequel.
I like it. I have lots of thoughts, but I don't want to go into them already because I know that we'll hit some of these here in a little bit.
For once, Jacob doesn't want to go deep in the outline.
Yes,
and there is no outline.
He's trying to control
listen,
himself.
I'm growing. I'm maturing as a podcaster. So, what? I know this is going to sound bad, because I know that
Everybody
Satan,
turn the volume up.
Yeah,
This
turn it
is the
down
good
or
part.
bleep. Just the whole question I have. So. There we go.
Join the Facebook page to know what he said. No, just kidding.
So when was Satan told, and this is where we led to the question about what his job was, why was he there? But was Satan told, don't mess with Adam and Eve? What rule did he break? I mean, I'm saying this understanding that God makes man in His image, and here they are rebelling against the one rule, and Satan kind of. He talks to them, manipulates, deceives them, twists truth. But is that a rule in the heavens? Like, what did he break? Like, was there a prior meeting as how we're going to engage with humanity?
Part of the fun of this topic is the Bible doesn't specifically address it. Mm-hmm. There's not a book that's going to give you the breakdown of how this works. And so we're left with a lot of information in the stories, and we're left to look at this and to wonder.
Yeah.
And I think as a Christian, that's an important part of Bible study. So is the wondering and the discussion, and it's not about having the answer.
Right.
It's about enjoying the conversation.
Right. So when we were saying in a previous episode, talking about the prophets perhaps sitting around the council, getting the orders from the council from God, and then they're taking it back to humanity. You believe this is kind of an Adam and Eve's role, sitting around this table, meaning that they perhaps were familiar with these other beings up there?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Eve doesn't seem terribly surprised that the serpent is there.
Yeah.
It seems to be that maybe they had spoken before.
Right.
A cherub is a guardian spirit.
I'd love to think he was guarding that tree.
That's what I think.
I love that.
I'm never going to preach it, but I think that.
Then he breaks his domain, and then anyway.
But that explains the question you just asked. Was there a meeting earlier that said this is how we engage with humans?
Yeah.
Maybe not. But was there a meeting that Satan was created for this tree? That's the rule he breaks then.
Well, I think it makes sense that God had given to mankind a way to obey and also a way to show love. Don't eat from these trees. This is the command. It makes sense then that there would also be a command in the heavenly world as well, because they're created beings the same as we are.
Yeah, logically, there would have to be something that he broke, because he does get the curse at the end of chapter 3. So
God doesn't say, well, I should have told you not to do that. I guess that's wrong.
Somehow he knew what he was doing was against God.
So really, when you break this down, we're going to kind of look at 7 different ideas that we kind of brainstormed a little bit about what is exactly is going on with the temple and how is Satan mirroring this. And the first one that I came up with when I thought about it is that God actually is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Everything that exists because he imagined it and spoke it into being with his own power. And what the gods, lowercase g, claim to do in their stories is a shallow echo of that.
Right.
Their stories are weird. The pagan stories, you're left with, okay, the gods exist, but where did they come from? And the stories are very strange. There's always some pre-existing something out there. The only way that this makes sense, the only way you can have creation is if you have an unmoved mover, that everything that begins to exist has a cause which is not itself. And so what they're doing is claiming the works of God as their own. This is a lie. This is the basis of what they're claiming.
Right. They're not creating anything. They're taking credit for what's being created. Like they're trying to take someone else's work and take that credit. Which again, this makes us think, and this is where I get I start asking questions. Is we can somehow conclude that since God creates and they are imitating, that they can't create something. And I'm not saying they can or can't, or that they have no power, or like we have those kinds of questions. Like if God controls the universe and everything, if God controls the weather, then they can't. If God can, you get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So when we say this, when I 100% agree, we don't consider the fact that perhaps these beings can also be involved in some of these things like weather, for example, which I'll hit that a little bit later.
Well, why don't you go ahead and dig into that for a minute? Like, I know this is something that you've brought up before.
Yeah, well, just that the Job scenario, which is interesting to me, which when the Satan visits God and the whole thing happens. What about Job? You consider Job, and basically God sets some perimeters and says you can do what you want, but you just can't kill him, kind of thing. Well. So the two conclusions I've drawn is that they go back to God and say, okay, God, if you can kind of stir up the winds from the four corners and can you do that? And can you send some hail, fire from heaven? Or they have the ability to do this. And so my question is, okay, did God give and delegate out some of the weather and those kinds of things to these beings? Not necessarily they have like all this power, but he's delegated this responsibility, and that's what they're in charge of, and they're manipulating.
Well, we know they have some power. When we study Exodus, we get this imagery of the priests of the gods of Egypt are mirroring the plagues that God is doing. They don't they don't cancel out what God does.
Yeah.
But they're saying, oh yeah, well, we can turn water to blood too. Right. We can throw our staff down and it turn into a serpent also.
Yeah.
But you notice they never do anything original.
Right.
It's always an echo of what it is that God has done. Mm-hmm. And so I think for sure when Paul is wandering around and he comes across these demon-possessed people, they have uncanny abilities. That poor guy who we were just talking about a minute ago by the Sea of Galilee, They kept chaining him up, and he kept breaking the chains.
Supernatural powers.
There is supernatural power because these are real beings. And it makes sense to me because I'm only a human, and I can affect nature. I can chop down trees. I can turn on a fan. I'm able to lift things, very light things with handles. But I'm capable of moving things. It makes sense to me that a being that's greater than me would have the ability to do things that are greater than mankind.
Right. And there's people now trying to, we can get into this whole chemtrails and controlling weather too, and that'll be fun, but I'm not going to. But,
Jacob is our resident conspiracy theorist.
Oh, man, there's just so much truth in it. But, this idea of trying to play gods, I don't think that the angelic beings, but I think that that there's a side of it that we're trying to do the same thing. We're recreating different kind of plants. We're messing with DNA. We're trying to recreate stuff ourselves. And perhaps it's because we're made in the image of God, but I don't know, or maybe we're just trying to play God. I'm really thinking through a lot of this stuff on the smaller level, but
no, it's interesting.
I don't want to take it off of too big.
No, but I think that's the point of what I want to do with this podcast is just talk about it.
Yeah,
let's pull up the stuff that you think is interesting, and we'll run circles around this. But it's also kind of cool. The Book of Enoch talks about that the Watchers brought down forbidden knowledge, and so they seem to have known quite a bit about how the world worked. And so, if you were a supernatural being, and you knew how, like, for instance, that the Nile's going to flood at this time every year, and you tell your prophet, hey, this is going to happen, all of a sudden you present yourself as the god of the Nile.
Actually,
and bada boom, bada bing.
Christopher Columbus did that when he discovered the Americas.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he came back where he said that if you don't give me your land in 7 days, my God will blot out the sun, because he knew there was going to be a solar eclipse happening. And so 7 days later he came back and they wouldn't give him the land, and so he said blah, 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 and the sun went away. And they said they bowed down to him because they thought he was superior to them.
What a sketchy character.
That's how we got here. So,
well, I didn't get here that
also, I don't know if that's true. I read it on the internet.
Oh, it's got to
really
be true.
Cool,
it's
really
it's
cool
online.
If there's one on TikTok, if it's not on TikTok, it's not true.
But what's interesting when you're talking about God actually creates the rules is what you have listed here, the supernatural and natural world. I think that's so important because it really goes into what I was mentioning earlier, where down here you have the counterfeits gods claiming to have created and rule over things. I think it's so important because, again, they're not trying to go at God like they're stronger than God. They can't think of anything else other than what has already been created. And that's what's really important. Do they have the power to maybe manipulate creation or add more matter or whatever you want to say to our physical world? I have no idea. But they can't do anything that hasn't been done by God.
Right. Well, he's given them the ability to do so. It's only because he's given them that.
I think it's pretty cool when you read in the Gospels and the moments when people try to kill Jesus, and he's like, absolutely not. You can't throw me off that hill.
Somehow, yeah.
Or he says, you couldn't kill me unless the Father had allowed it. Like, I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
You're not able, no matter what supernatural being you conjure up, is not a rival to the Lord Most High.
Yeah.
But they present themselves as though they are. I think you see this pretty clearly with the Baal cycle. Mm-hmm. Like where Elijah is up on the mountain and he's like, hey guys, just you ask Baal for fire and lightning, and I'll ask Yahweh for fire and lightning, and we'll see who wins. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like Baal, who I think is a real being, isn't able to do anything.
And perhaps he's done this in the past. I mean, for me, it's like I think God said, "You're not going to do it today, Baal. I'm going to show myself here. I mean, you're nothing to me compared to me." Because I was always thinking, like, is it just idiotic people that cut and whipping themselves and all this other stuff, and this Baal has done nothing? Like, at least we have to stop and consider that there's been some kind of power that's been displayed for people to say that. Not manipulated power, not
that's right,
magic, but real something that's coming.
Yeah, I don't think God forbids necromancy and magic and that stuff because it's ridiculous.
That's right.
I think he forbids it because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Because in order to participate in that, you have to be giving gifts to fallen beings. You have inverted the order.
And so when God is the one that actually creates the natural and supernatural and the rules and whatnot, they might be able to add to some of this stuff, but they can't bring up anything that God hasn't already created. And then I think of a bunch of scripture where it talks about how we live our lives, and we can't do this. I've been really talking about it. John's been going through Corinthians, and we're talking about love, and there's a lot of stuff that we love because he first loved us. I think we look at our lives so much as like, I'm going to make sure that I can bring the love today towards this person, and that's how I'm going to change my life, because I'm just focusing on conjuring up my own love in this. But we can't create love. It came from the Father first. It comes from God, and now we're doing this. But we change it and we manipulate it into saying, this is my love that I'm going to give to somebody else. I'm going above and beyond. I'm being a good Christian. I'm doing all of this. I think it's the same thing that's happening here. We just use a different format. We use, love and patience and kindness and goodness and honesty like it's ours. But it all came from creation, from day one.
And I think that's where I was moving with my thought process here is like, how do I apply this? I acknowledge God as the giver.
That's right.
I recognize that it is not by might nor by power. It's the Lord. Unless he builds the house, they labor in vain to build it. That God is the one who created the heavens and the earth. And so even if Baal claims to be the storm god, or people worship Thor as the god of thunder, it was the Lord who put the world into motion. And so I'm not afraid of that. That's a title that's falsely held. And so from the very beginning of this rebellion, it's built on a counterfeit claim. It's not real. These are real beings. They have real power, but they do not have a right to rule over the things that they claim to.
But that's what really gets me confused on that, because I think that point that we were just talking about is great. But did these people do it on purpose? Did these beings do it on purpose? Because I see a lot of people that are Christians, and I'm looking at a mirror and say, I love God, and to God be the glory, and then I turn around and act as if I'm the one doing all this stuff. So I'm not actively trying to seek out and disobey God and go against God and overthrow God. I'm not actively saying I'm stronger than God and I should be the one in the driver's seat. And yet my life doesn't show that at all times. In fact, more often than not, it shows me being the one that wants to make the decisions and me being the one not surrendering to the one that created it all, but trying to change it. So were these beings kind of doing the same thing, or did they actively have an approach that says, I need to be the one that's in charge? I know God created everything and la-ti-da, but I'm the one that would do a better
I think they
job.
purposefully choose to do this. I think that this is a power play, that this is an attempt to rebel against what God has said. We get that in Genesis 6. You get it in Jude. You get it in 1 Peter, where it says they left their first estate. They're, at least in the Genesis 6 context, those watchers knew this is off the table, that we're going to do it anyway.
And so is that where grace comes in for mankind, perhaps, or for the majority of mankind?
Oh, you're going to get it. Yes, I think so. It's not that we don't deserve punishment or that we're somehow better than these things. We, given enough time, mankind is pretty nasty. And these are old beings. They've been around for a very long time. And so whether they were as evil as they could possibly be, like in an instant, probably not. It's more of a gradual slope, I would think. One wrong decision followed by another.
So we're saying that God creates rules, the natural and supernatural world. And as he rules, does he create rules for us and for the heavenly beings, right? That they have to abide by. And ultimately, God will abide by his own rules or parameters that he creates. The question that I have, and I've been thinking about this too, is that, is there some, and there's no way to really prove it. I always just kind of wonder, why is there an announcement of things? Meaning, why did Jesus... We know that in Genesis 3, God says that this is going to be a seed from this woman that's going to be born, it's going to crush your head. And we know that Satan's going to try to stop the seed from happening, right? And I'm thinking, as the people on the earth multiply and there's more and more people, it's more and more confusing to try to figure it out. But yet God continues to give clues, like it's going to be of the seed of David. It's going to be from Abraham. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, is there some kind of rule that there needs to be a proclamation of what's going to happen? And when I say that, is that also a rule? This is one of the questions that I've got from individuals. Are there rules that the evil realm has to say, whether it's through movies or does it have to proclaim what they're going to do before they do it to humanity? These are some of the questions that I'm getting from individuals that I think it's just interesting to think about.
That's a good question. The first one, my personal thought, and not that I'm the smartest guy, but I think God intentionally narrows it down so that you can prove your alliance one way or another. If it was just random happenstance and I accidentally went against this guy, not knowing that he was of the line of whoever and whatnot, then it would just be kind of a unlucky decision on my part to punch that guy in the face and not the next guy. But if he says, no, this is exactly who it is, this is exactly where he's coming from, and this is exactly, and I actively seek out this person or this line and go against it, it's pretty cut and dry that I am not for God in that situation, compared to if I be nasty to this guy, perhaps I'm just in my flesh, and that's kind of what the discussion we were just having. So I think it definitely draws the line in the sand and says, do you want to cross it or do you want to be with me? That's my opinion on the first one. The other one, I don't know. I think that's really cool that there has to be these rules of engagement. You know, we're battling, if we're talking armies and whatnot, they have to announce so that the innocent people can get out of the way or whatever. And so you can narrow down to who you're really fighting with. That's a cool concept. No idea if there's any truth to that.
Yeah, I think some of that, and I think some of that announcement stuff too would be maybe proof that this is the real thing and not the counterfeit. Does that make sense?
Explain to me.
Well, like if he's saying this is going to be a David and that, Abraham and the line, and it happens,
just as he said,
that's because the creator of it, the one that's the most valuable. Anywhere you have something valuable, you're going to have a counterfeit, always.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So definitely Satan wants us to believe, and this could go to those the evil people who are just diving into you can actually believe a counterfeit is the actual thing.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Like you can die for that, like because you believe it so much. So I just think some of the announcement might be, this is just my opinion, but could be some of that to remind us that this is the real thing.
My mindset runs with Nick's. I think it's God's power play. I don't know that and so here's how I operate with this. Unless the Bible tells me there is a rule, I'm going to assume there could be, but I'm not going to come out and say, oh, definitely. How do you know that? Because I figured it out and I just know it intuitively. Because I am wrong constantly about what's going on. I don't define right and wrong for myself. And so I think we need to limit ourselves to the text, but we should also be super intrigued by this and ask ourselves, there's definitely a pattern of announcing. There's definitely a pattern. I doubt David was very happy. Thanks for putting that bullseye on my back there, God, for me and my descendants. Appreciate that.
Could have made it a little easier for me.
Yeah, so everything exists for me. But it's God is king, and we are not. But these beings have set themselves up as though they are. And so they begin to model especially in the ancient world, we find this. The Bible tells us that the Garden of Eden was a well-watered place, and that there were rivers that poured out of the garden and watered the world. And water flows downhill. That's how it works. Later on in the Old Testament, the Garden of Eden is going to be called the mountain of God. And so it's a pattern in Scripture that the Garden of Eden was a high place. And then for the rest of the Bible, every time we find a high place, it's almost synonymous with a place of worship. If you want to know where the temple was, you go uphill. You want to know where people are sacrificing, it's up on the hill. Why do you think that the satanic realm took that idea of a high place and made it part of their religions as well?
Well, I have to. When I was talking to somebody the other day, they went to go visit a couple parks in California and went to Yosemite, and I'm like, if you go up in those places and you look around, it feels like a holy space. It really is a beautiful place, and being up there, but at the same time, when you look at the stars, everything else, it seems like as you go up, you're approaching the heavens or the gods and those kinds of things. And I agree with you. And when it comes to the mimicking, and that isn't that like where the conquest of Joshua, like it seems like most of the places that people that were dwelling in the high places, those are the ones that they were supposed to wipe out. That they were kind of devoted to these pagan or these other gods kind of thing.
Just do a search in the Bible for high places.
Yeah.
And immediately you're going to see a connection to altars and temples. Mm-hmm. To me, the difference is that God creates the high place, and then he builds a temple for himself, for mankind to dwell in. Adam is made outside of the garden, and then he's brought into the garden. What the enemy seems to do is demand that humanity obey them and build them a temple on a high place.
Yeah.
Whereas God is providing and protecting and generous and giving, these beings are manipulative and self-serving and demanding of worship and service. And so it's almost an anti-Eden, if you think of it that way. This is a mountain not of God, but of the gods, like Mount Olympus or those other places that just about every culture has one of these.
So, John, we were talking this morning in Sunday school about authority and where authority comes from, and how you can live your life with authority when you have Jesus at the center or at the head of the church, and the authority that comes with that. And one of the analogies that was brought up was like a badge, a policeman's badge. Mm-hmm. The badge has no power, but there's power behind the badge that allows the police officer to act in a certain way towards a civilian. And so God has a badge because God is the authority. So there's a badge that was created to show that there is authority behind it. But these guys say, build me a badge so then I will have authority.
Yeah, and they make their temple in mockery of what God did.
Right.
And so it appears as though this is a legitimate place of worship. Mm-hmm. There is a spirit here, but it's not the Spirit of God.
Right. And it's even beyond that, because God has the authority to act on your life in certain ways. Whether he does or not is up to him and his righteousness. But these other beings are acting on your life, and then they go and reverse engineer a way that gives them authority to do what they're already doing. And that to me is a big one. We're talking about how you can figure out what a counterfeit is, and I think you have it written in the notes too. Is like there
are very little notes. I doubt I wrote anything useful.
These things are already trying to integrate themselves into your life, and then they're giving themselves a means for the end. They're creating a way that allows them to do what they're already doing. God is saying, I am everything. I am what you want. It's your decision whether you're going to come to me or not. And I think that's so powerful when you look at that, because God wants you and he's knocking at the door and he's there. But there's ultimately this dynamic between you and him that builds a relationship that goes with it. These other beings are saying, look how awesome I am, and coming like a door-to-door salesman. They're coming to you and then they're trying to sell a piece of junk. So they make commission. God is saying, I am everything. I give life and life abundantly. It's up to you if you want to come and bring the real authority into your life.
So I have a applicable example
of
this. So my senior year of high school, I went to Washington, D.C., and I wasn't really familiar with, I was...
America?
Yeah, exactly.
So he was in Michigan
I was
schools.
sheltered. And so I wasn't really familiar with the whole, guys standing on the corner, opening their trench coat jackets, and they have,
watches.
So I bought a pair. I'll never forget. I bought a pair of yellow Oakleys. Mm-hmm. I seriously thought these things were real, and I told everybody they were real. I mean, they looked just like they imitated. They imitated the real thing, and so I wore those things for all the time, and everyone was like, "These are fakes," and you don't know nothing. Well, finally.
It was a reputable person that sold them to
There
me.
was a reputable.
He had a really nice coat.
There was a reputable person who knew Oakley and had something to do with Oakley.
Oh no!
Who finally told me those were fake.
And you believed him.
And I believed him but here's my whole applicable point to it though, is I had to get close to somebody of the real thing. And so I think that's the importance of us in our walk, in our faith with Christ, is being close to, as if we are close to the real thing, then the counterfeit stuff will be revealed more.
And I think it also makes sense then that a satanic counterfeit is going to appear righteous. It's going to appear like, well, it makes sense. This God is acting, or this appears to be religious, or this appears to be Bible-y. And it's, when you examine it, though, you find that it is at its heart opposed to the message of Scripture.
But how does it appear those things? How does it appear righteous? That's the big question for me, is because we're trying to figure out how we can decipher, is this the real thing or not? I think Nick is right on the right track. When you get to the real thing, everything else falls away. I think you actually did a sermon about that when the fire consumes and then the real is there. And so I think that's definitely the answer. But when we're in it the day-to-day, when Eve was standing there with Satan, she somehow could not...
She was deceived.
Discern that this is not the right answer, and that there is other options, but somehow it appeared that the tree was righteous in her eyes at that point. And how does whoever, Satan, the evil realm, the guy down the street, whoever, how do they make these counterfeits appear righteous? That's the point that I like.
So going back to my illustration, and that's the sometimes the things we forget is that Satan and his counterfeits, there is some power there, because they can make it look just like these Oakleys I had, they looked exactly like another pair that I knew were real Oakleys at that time. And when I finally found out they were fake, there was one little dash in the Oakley logo that I never would have noticed to my eyes, that person pointed out, this is why this is a fake. And so they can make it appear the same color. It's righteous. They can make it look the same. The plastic was the same. The rubber on it was the same. Everything about them was the same except for one. So there's got to be, in all of Satan's counterfeits, there's got to be something in there.
So you kept wearing them, right? You kept wearing them?
Oh, heck yeah, man.
So I was going to say, no one's going to
I kept wearing them.
So then spiritually, I'm glad that you did. That would have been sad. But you expect that to change over time. That Satan isn't going to pick one style and run with it. Mm-hmm. That he's going to constantly be updating, going to be mirroring and opposing what it is that God is doing. And God has acted different ways at different times. He has a longer plan than just one event. And we see that with the high places. We find that satanically, he also did high places. And we find that on just about every continent you can think of. People want to pray, they go up. They're trying to. There's a symbolic reference to that. There's another thing that I noticed, and that is that when God creates His temple, He puts in it an image of Himself. Except that image He brings to life. He breathes into it the breath of life, and so there's this concept of diversity. I'm going to make my image something that's not me. It's going to be a thing in and of itself, and there's a love for it, and there's a responsibility and a relationship with it. Mm-hmm. And God then brings that image into the garden where it serves. Satanically, a pagan temple also has an image that's brought into it, but it doesn't come alive. Instead, the God, lowercase g, is supposed to come and possess that object. You can see right away, this is not about diversity. This is not about unity amongst diversity. This is about, tell me more about me. Give me more. This is like a parasite almost latching on and drawing blood from the host. And so when I think of what it is that God did, He intended to lift people up. He took a bunch of dirt and He turned earth alive and made humanity. Instead, what Satan's counterfeit is they make these idols, and then the actual image of God is supposed to bow down and worship this stone or this tree.
Yeah. I got a weird thought train going right now. I think it's kind of interesting. So the image that God puts in the garden is us. We are to bear the name of God or His image.
Right.
But these satanic counterfeits are utilizing us to basically get a power source. I hate to talk about this because it's not that if we worship them enough times, then they have enough power to do something. Like, I don't think they're drawing enough power off of us. But is it not interesting that it seems like their desire is to get to us? And why? Because we are imagers of God, right? I think that's kind of the ticket that they're trying to get to. When Satan is tempting Jesus, he just asks for him to worship him because he wants God to bow down to him. I think we are the closest thing to God, being made in the image of God, that Satan can manipulate into
I think it actually gets heavier than that in the New Testament, because we're not just now the image of God, we are also the temple of God. The Spirit of God comes and dwells within us. We're not trying to find Eden. We're trying to be Eden-ish. We're trying to go out and be a blessing wherever we go. And so if Satan can take a Christian or a human and corrupt it or keep it from serving the Lord, then he's not trying to make you into a mass murderer. He's not trying to cause you to rob banks. What he's trying to do is fight God. And by separating you from God, you are not the point. And I know that's upsetting for people, but Satan is fighting a much bigger battle than trying to make me be unfaithful. Humans are a means to attack God.
And that really goes into my question earlier. How can they make the counterfeit look so alike, so righteous in the moment? When you were buying the Oakleys, how many real Oakleys were around? Did the guy have in his other side real Oakleys and said, would you like to compare them to a real Oakley and make sure that...
in my experience, they do not do that.
So
they are not honest, upright salesmen.
He is separating you from the real and showing you just the fake. And so that's where it comes, and this is where Romans 12:2 comes directly to mind, where it says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your minds. Satan isn't changing the original. Satan knows he can't live up to the original. He is a counterfeit, and he knows that, but if he can change your mind so you think that he's the original, if he can change the battlefield, if he can manipulate the situation to where Eve is thinking that this tree is God or is better than God, how come he can't make you think this Oakley is better than the original? And by the way, it's half price. Like, it's so easy for him to manipulate when you are away from the original and when he is able to conform you to the situation that you're in. But if we are renewed or transformed, that's what we've been talking about in Sunday school again, by the renewal of our minds and then testing so you may discern the will of God, that to me is such a powerful message for what we're talking about here with these counterfeits. Is like, we have the ability to go back to the source anytime we want, wherever we are in any situation. There's nobody that can pluck us from the hand. Like, there's nothing that can get us in a situation where we can't test, is this a counterfeit or not? And we can look it up to God. And it makes sense to me, but how often do we fall victim to only seeing one way? I look back to Josh Nelson when he preached that sermon about Eve in the garden, and she only sees the one tree when she's talking to Satan. And it's like, how often do we get manipulated into seeing there's only one way to do something or one answer or one, and that has to be real. That has to be the right way because there's only one.
So that also brings up in my mind, so Satan's desire is to present a counterfeit to get us not to look at the other trees, just focus in on this one. Mm-hmm. But there also seems to be a hatred for mankind as the image of God.
There's definitely seems to be a jealousy, but there's a special relationship that God has with humanity. I'm not saying that let us make man in our image kind of thing, and then there's something else that happens with Adam and Eve. There definitely seems to be a jealousy that's there or something that's going on. But I also keep thinking about, like, as we're talking in this episode, that I think it's 1 Corinthians 11:14. It talks about he masquerades himself as an angel of light. That this is how Satan works. There's a lot of things that are good that he gets us involved in. There's a lot of things. It's not that he's coming in the occult. He's not coming with someone crawling up the wall. Not necessarily. A lot of the stuff and major work that he's doing sometimes is in the churches. Sometimes it's in nice people. Those kinds of things. And this is where it's like gets real hard to say, how do we discern lest we're walking in the Spirit as to what's really of God and what's not? Because this is where I believe that there is a real war happening in this unseen realm, and he's trying to get at us to get at God. So this reality of it is that we got to figure out, like, what does it mean to discern? But we have to start asking these questions, and I've taught this a lot. Talked to the students when I taught at the Troy Christian Schools at youth group. We don't wear our armor because we think we're okay. We're not. We're fine. There's no war happening. And I'm like, there is literally something happening around us, in your mind, around you, with people around you. And we have to be in prayer. We need to be in the Word. We need to understand the truth, and we need to be able to compare it with what's coming our way. But anyway, I just was thinking about this. He masquerades himself as the angel of light.
Yeah,
verse.
so I think we can definitely say that Satan desires to shift us, to sift us as wheat, like he did with Peter.
And control us.
He wants to control you and cause you to join his war against God.
Yeah.
If he can convince you to rebel against God, then that's winning. But you opened the door on another question there when you said crawling up the walls. Uh-huh. What's up with the demon possession thing? Why would a demon want to possess a human being? And do you think that connects at all to the idea that we're the image of God?
I think it's all about, like, I mean, God gave us a purpose, right? Rule, the dominion, authority, all that. And that used to be his job, like we already talked about. And so I don't know if it's so necessarily to destroy us as much as it is to just get us to do the opposite of what God wants us to do. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Like the whole jealousy thing. Like, I've always thought of it in the sense of, like, when Satan and his demons fell, it's like God took that, like, the deed away from him and said, well, I created you to do something and you didn't do it, so now I'm going to give it to these people.
What do you think, Jacob?
I have two thoughts. One, they're disembodied spirits in Nephilim and trying to find a place to go and reside. The other side, like going with your train of thought, is if it's about power and control, a way to control God's imagers is to inhabit the body and try to take over that control. So it's a manipulation tactic, and that's the hard part, is that if there's someone that's demon possessed, they don't necessarily have to be climbing up walls and saying a lot of weird stuff. I mean, they could be very kind, nice people and teaching your Sunday school classes. Like this could be.
Nope, that's creepy.
I know.
Like that.
It's wild to think about it, but the reality of it is, I think this is maybe a control thing. That goes
in the story,
but we're getting in a whole different story.
Yeah, but that's part of the fun here.
When we're talking about because
This
now
is
we're talking
rambling,
about
there's no rules.
Because then that begs the question to me: Can a demon truly possess someone who Christ is in?
Well, no, but all humanity is made in His image, right? It's not necessarily about can a demon possession, but what's the desire to possess a human is the question. And I think that to possess an imager of God is to try to control something that God's created for good, and He's created us for a purpose and to do good works. And they're trying to manipulate that. That's just my thought. That's how I'm kind of training it. I'm not talking about if you're saved or unsaved. I'm talking about their desire to control you, whether they're oppressing you or possessing you. They're trying to control and manipulate. Okay. They're always trying to do that.
So in the story where the Ark of the Covenant is taken into Dagon's temple, there's this really cool ending where God just annihilates Dagon's statue. He knocks his head off and cuts his hands off and sets him at the door of the temple. And that idea of the desecration of the idol, when you read the story, is viewed as like the massive punch, the knockout blow to this pagan god. I kind of think that that's what Satan is mimicking. He's trying to destroy what God has done. That's why he went after Adam and Eve in the garden. That's why he continues to do these kinds of things. And demon possession is not the normal approach that I think Satan is trying. I'm not saying he's trying to possess everyone. I don't think that. But instead, you do find it, though. It is a reality. The Gospels are filled with it. Why? What were they doing? And I think when you understand that imagery of temples, of high places, of what God did when he breathed into us the breath of life, and also how they were being worshipped by indwelling these stones, these trees, it's the ultimate insult to the maker of God to steal possession of his image.
When I think of the demon possession, I try to think of strategy and what makes the most sense.
This is one of those happy conversations. I'm so glad I brought it up.
Yeah, thanks, John. We were doing so well. When I think of that in demon possession and thinking that he is just trying to take down an idol of God, an imager of God, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because if someone sees something that is demon possessed, there's never, I don't want to say never, I would think in the church especially, or in most people, they wouldn't be like, yeah, I want some of that. I want to be climbing on the walls and twisting my head around and having nightmares all night and all this. So I don't think if you're looking at the grand scheme of what kind of strategy does this do, like Satan isn't defeating God by taking out one of his idols or 1,000 or 1,000,000 or whatever. So I don't follow the whole, like, I'm putting the final nail in the coffin by taking over one of your idols and destroying it.
I'm not trying to say that it's putting a nail in God. I'm saying that by doing that, they are insulting him as strongly as they can.
But what I'm thinking is, like Jacob is saying, if you're going to take over the thoughts and emotions and even actions of a human being, would it not better serve you as the evil realm to put him in charge of a church, in charge of Sunday school, in charge of something to make him look counterfeit?
Well, I think he does that.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to point out is that there is diversity in the plan.
And that's where I get confused over the demon possession, how we view it in the movies.
It's because most of us think about this as we do the movies, and I think this is the hard part, is that most of our thought process is what we viewed on TV or saw in pictures on books when we were little kids, and we have an idea what this looks like. And the reality of it is, if in fact that Satan can masquerade himself as an angel of light, it's very possible for someone who is under the heavy influence of demonic activity can be extremely loving and kind.
Right.
And
that makes more sense to me from a strategy standpoint.
They can be in ministry and all about their own gain and don't care about any of the sheep, kind of thing. It could be lots of things. It could be, as I said, I'm not trying to scare anybody. This isn't about being scared. It's about understanding how this works. And
so let me bring up then another point that kind of goes along with this that I think may further our discussion a bit, and that is that when God creates his temple and he puts an image in the temple, he puts Adam there. He breathes into it the breath of life, and man becomes a living soul. he then empowers that image and gives him dominion over the earth.
Yeah.
When God raises up a servant, it's not bondage, it's freedom.
Yeah.
It's this idea of, I don't want to control you. I want to love you. I want you to love me. I want you to live as I made you to be. And there's this sense of which when God places mankind in the garden, it's not really about, God doesn't need trees. God doesn't need fruit to grow. He makes this place beautiful for mankind. He makes it full of food and water for mankind. And so when God creates his temple and they bring in the image of the Lord, the image is provided for. There's diversity amongst it. It's not just about putting a stone in the middle. But when Satan does this, when the satanic realm does this, humanity is enslaved, and their job is to provide for the idol.
Right.
Bring me stuff. And so you
Make
have
the
this
God happy.
this rock in the middle of the room, or a tree, a stone, something. And it's not about that idol providing for people. They're offering idols for the idol to eat.
Yeah.
They're pouring out wine for the idol to drink. This is a complete flip-flop of the Garden of Eden. It isn't God. This isn't the way he set it up to be. It was designed for mankind to have dominion. When you read the satanic elements of this, it's the exact opposite of that. What Satan wants to do is to control. That this was intended to lift us up, and instead, paganism, the worship of these false gods, brings us down. It binds us to.
That's an interesting wrinkle, I think, that we're kind of throwing into this, because is the objective of these counterfeit beings to obtain the worship that is supposed to be towards Yahweh, or is it for just humans to not worship Yahweh? Are you following my question here? Is if Baal is the guy that's the counterfeit, is his objective to obtain our worship? So our worship's supposed to go to Yahweh, and now we're shooting it over towards Baal instead. Or is it a win if we just don't worship Yahweh?
I think it's both.
If we cut that off.
I think talking about the darkness, talking about the dark as though it's a monolithic thing. They all think the same thing. They all value the same thing. They all want the same thing is an oversimplification of the supernatural world. Just like humans have different wants and different desires and different things that they like, I think that also is echoed in the supernatural realm as well. And so there is this ultimate war that they have against God. They're at war with him. And so they do things to try to insult, try to raise their thrones up. But you also have that element in which they just genuinely hate you. They know that you have a purpose. And so I don't think that there's a one solution to this. And it doesn't have to always be logical. They're allowed to do a lot of things, and sometimes they do things that aren't necessarily the way we would do things.
Because to bring this all together, I think in a bow, we're talking about being able to decide what is counterfeit and what is real. But also then you throw in this idea that when God creates the temple, it's full of life for human beings to live. And Jesus says, "Come to me and I give life and life abundantly." But then there's a lot of times where it seems these idols and these negative beings are providing me with everything I want, are giving me things that are giving me a better life, are bringing me prosperity, are bringing me, hope and joy and laughter. And so how would you decide that this seems really good to me, but in reality it's really, really bad? It's a counterfeit thing.
It doesn't seem though that like they're bringing, like I think what I'm hearing you say is that God brings his image in and is the provider for it, versus like some of these other gods who are wanting something from their people. I need you to bring me sacrifice. I need you to bring me food.
In the garden, God doesn't need anything.
Right.
He doesn't need gardeners, but he empowers and enriches mankind and gives them purpose. What you get in paganism is this idea that, no, your purpose is to feed me.
Right.
Give me. Whereas in the garden, you find that God's purpose was to feed them.
So do you feel
is the God acting on them. And you get this with Jesus as well. Like, what? He's at the wedding. They're out of wine. What's he do? I'm going to make a lot of wine. Everyone's hungry. Bring me some loaves and some fishes. Wherever Jesus goes, there seems to be just an abundance.
Right.
He's not charging anybody. I'm going to heal you of your sickness. Oh, you're blind. I'll fix that. Wherever he goes, there's just this overflow of life. Whereas wherever the darkness goes, you find the opposite of that.
So
Give me just one more second.
Sure,
I think Paul kind of talks about this. He says, how do you know the fruit of the Spirit or the works of the darkness? They manifest themselves in their actions. That you can see this. They'll know you're Christians by your love. Paganism didn't really care whether you loved Baal or not.
And I think
instead, it was about, are you willing to submit to this God?
I think
Will
that's
you
a good
do
answer.
this?
What I was trying to get at with that last statement is I feel like there's more people today, perhaps, I don't know the statistics, but I feel like there's a higher percentage today of people that are not spiritual at all or don't believe in any gods, spiritual beings, and whatnot. And I'm just thinking that has to be a win for the bad side.
That's right.
And so if your idea is not just you need to worship me, because these guys are doing that, you need to pour out your wine for me, you need to sacrifice so I can be stronger. But they also say, hey, if we just get these humans to think that there is no God, we win. And so that's the wrinkle that I'm trying to throw into this, because if I can just say, oh, hey, here you won $10,000 on a scratch-off ticket, yes. God's not real, right? Like, that's a silly analogy, but it's a way of them. I'm not worshiping Baal. I'm not worshiping whatever, but I'm definitely not worshiping Yahweh either. Yeah. And that's a win. So if I can just provide a little bit of earthly love to this guy, then he'll stop believing in God or go away from, a relationship with Christ.
But I think you'll find when you talk to people who are heavy into these kind of things that Satan promises a lot and delivers very little. It's not that he's a provider. He's not, and you got to buy it. You got to earn it. Whereas with God, it's grace abundant. Mm-hmm. There's a love that Christ died for you, not because you deserved it, but because he loved you so much that he did.
That seems to flow around with the whole Old Testament story of choosing Abraham. I'm going to bless you so much, and you're going to be a blessing for everyone else.
He does not deserve it. Abraham is the worst dad ever, worst husband. He's just not good.
I just was thinking about, I know you went through 1 Corinthians 14, and just thinking about the idea of do we best reflect Jesus, or we best reflect Jesus when we come to home, we come to the party, we go to church, to give away, to serve, to love, to encourage, to not to get something. This idea of I'm here to give, not I'm here to receive. Sometimes I feel
like people show up to church and to worship and to life in general with this expectation. What are you going to give me?
Right.
What's in this for me?
But if we could change our mind and say, whether I just need to be loved, I need 5 people to talk to me, and I'm going to come and bless people. I'm going to come and pray for people. I'm going to come and encourage somebody today. It would change everything for them.
When that happens, we become like a tree planted by still waters.
It would be a beautiful thing.
We are joining in the kingdom of God. And I love, we're running up on the end of time here, but I love when Jesus teaches us to pray. He says, thy kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Like, that's the goal.
Yep.
That's what it's about. And if you want to ask what's the satanic counterfeit about, it's about not that. Anything but that.
And I think you're exactly right, though, when you're talking about what can I come and bring. And we talked about this just this morning in Sunday school, just the confidence, where that confidence come from to be able to give to somebody. Because a lot of the times we feel like, I just have nothing to give, or I'm not good enough to give, or I'm not whatever. But when you have authority that's granted to you because you have a relationship, you talked about the armor and the prayer and being in Scripture. When you have that, you have this authority. And when you have the authority and you feel the authority, then the confidence comes with it. And then when you have the confidence, you have the authority, you have the relationship, all of a sudden you can be the blessing because you know that God's going to have your back. You know that Jesus is going to provide. You know the Holy Spirit is going to groan for you when you don't know what to say. There's so many things that come with that. And that confidence, I think, is the ultimate thing that takes you over the top to then be the light because you know you're shining brighter than whatever. No matter how much water is put on your altar, you know that Jesus is going to bring the fire for you. And so I think that's such an awesome way to think about that and change, and again, transform our mind into being this light instead of conforming to what can I get out of this. We're going to say, what can I give into this?
Yeah, I think the what can I get out of this is the shallow end. Like that's the darkness. It's one of these is parasitic. Yeah. It's about what can I suck out of this place? Right. What can I get from you?
Vampiric is the word you used last week.
I like
that.
Probably because It's occurring to me for the first time now. Apparently, I said it before.
You did last
week.
Did
I?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great word. Great
yeah,
word.
But the idea is the same. That God did not call you to do that. He called you to be strong. He called you to make a difference.
Yeah.
He called you to love. He called you to one another. He called you to be brave. He called you to image him. And so if you want to resist the darkness,
walk in the light.
Walk in the light. Love one another. Forgive one another. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is all those things that are awkward and hard to do. When you break this down, it's intellectually interesting to me just to see Satan's spin on this, and you can see it repeated throughout the text. But it's also incredibly practical. I want to be part of what God is doing. I don't want to set myself up as the purpose. And so I got to change the way that I think. I got to change the way that I view myself and God. I'm not doing him a favor by going to church. I'm not doing him a favor by reading my Bible. I am going to be blessed by God. And when he blesses me, I'm going to bless others. I'm going to join in what God is doing. I don't know if this is making sense to you guys, but you got me all riled up now.
No, I love this. And as we're kind of talking about more practical stuff, I mean, is not religion kind of the strategy of Satan? I mean, a lot of people that, I guess, try to behave and they go through the motions and they have the checklists. And Jesus is offering something far greater and far bigger, the life abundant. And I think that for me, I know that it's so easy to somehow take that tree, that fruit, Satan has some other offer, and it just does not bring life. And I've had seasons, and I hate saying this, the ebb and flow of life and my journey with Jesus, but like there's been times when just really flowed out of the love and the Spirit of God, and it's been a really awesome thing. And out of that has come a lot of relational things and a lot of things that God has used my mouth for, or whatever the case is, my money, whatever. But then there's this side I've just moved towards a religious place, and I feel like I'm trading really the blessings of God for just this religion, this going through the motions, going through the practice and stuff. And anyway, I'm just thinking about how he masquerades himself as the angel of light, and how even us as Christians, and sometimes even pastors, we can just, I don't know, get off track a little bit and just got to come back to say, okay, God, this is who you are. And this is from the very beginning. This is what you've given me, and this is what you want to get out of me and give out and put out of me, and how I'm so blessed other people.
When the Apostle James is talking about religion, he says, you're talking about religion, faith without works, all that stuff. He says faith without works, that's a dead thing.
Right.
A living faith is what it's gonna breathe, it's gonna act, it's gonna do things. And he says, if you want to talk about religion, well, real religion, pure and undefiled before God the Father, is this: visit the orphans and the widows in their affliction, and keep oneself unstained from the world.
Yep.
It's not about you getting something, doing something. As a matter of fact, Jesus broke it down this way. He said, the whole law hangs on these two commands.
Right.
To love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's
good.
The kingdom.
And simple.